Hi everyone, thank you so much for tuning into my talk. I am Madalina Vlasceanu, a final year doctoral student at Princeton University in the Department of Psychology and Neuroscience. In this presentation, I'll be exploring the causal connection between people's beliefs and their corresponding behaviors, both in the general non-ideological space, but also in the political domain. This project emerged from my broader research interest in addressing the prevalence of misinformation through belief and behavioral change. And to give you a few examples of why this topic is particularly important in the current context, we know that a third of Americans believe global warming is a conspiracy. A third of American parents believe vaccines cause autism. And almost a third of Americans believe the coronavirus was created in a lab. And holding these beliefs can have dire consequences because false beliefs have been associated with problematic behaviors. So false beliefs have, for instance, been associated with increased climate change denial, decreased vaccination rates, and increased intergroup prejudice. Therefore, over the past few years, I've tested several socio-cognitive strategies that can change false beliefs. These strategies are situated at different levels of analysis. For example, at the individual level, I studied how memory, emotions, predictions, and social norms, and at the collective level, how conversations and network structure can be factors that might change beliefs. And briefly, to give you an overview here, at the memory level, I found that increasing the memory strength of a statement increases its believability, while decreasing its strength decreases its believability. And given the close connection between memory and emotions, in another set of studies, I found that increasing the emotional arousal associated with a statement increases the believability of that statement. We also found that making prediction errors about relevant evidence associated with a belief can also be effective at changing that belief, such that the larger the errors, the more belief change occurs. At the social norms level, we found that evidence that appears as normative is more likely to change beliefs than evidence that appears as non-normative. At the collective level, I found that people change their beliefs according to what their partners say in conversations, and that the structure of the network people are embedded in predicts how people's beliefs will change to align with their community. But today, I want to focus on a study that aims at translating this change in beliefs into tangible, real-world behavioral change. The main questions I ask here are, can beliefs be used to predict behavior? But more importantly, from a policy perspective, does belief change lead to behavioral change? Prior literature on these issues has suffered from various inconsistencies, which I think are product of the mostly correlational work on this question. And for instance, some studies have found that beliefs do predict behaviors. So religious beliefs have been found to predict crime rates. Beliefs about intelligence predict learning success. In the health domain, beliefs about diseases have been associated with preventative behaviors. In the theory of plant behavior or the health belief model, for instance, individuals who believe they're susceptible to tuberculosis were more likely to have a voluntary chest X-ray. On the other hand, there are studies showing that beliefs about outgroup members are an unreliable predictor on how people's behaviors towards those outgroup members will be. Here, we're investigating this question experimentally, going beyond correlations in the hope to disentangle the causal connection between beliefs and behaviors. So in study 1, we asked participants to rate the accuracy from 0 to 100 of a set of statements, half accurate and half inaccurate. These statements had been pre-tested on a sample of participants such that they're ambiguously accurate, in other words, moderately endorsed. We have focused here on health beliefs because they're relevant to most people, but also because health topics had been used in prior literature and they're relatively neutral on the ideological spectrum. Then participants were given the opportunity to donate a sum of money given by our lab to one or more corresponding campaigns designed to promote that particular belief in the general population. So for the statement, children can outgrow peanut allergies, the campaign, if funded, would promote this belief through various means, such as commercials or flyers. Then participants are given the evidence. The evidence tells them which of the statements are true and which are false. And after reading this evidence, they are asked to rate their beliefs again and are given the chance to change their donations. So in August 2020, we collected data from 183 cloud research workers, and we found that beliefs at pretest predicted behaviors at pretest. But more importantly, from a policy perspective, that belief change from pre to post-test predicted behavioral change. So when evidence was in favor of the true information, participants increased their beliefs and their corresponding donations to those campaigns. And when the evidence was against the false information, participants decreased their beliefs and decreased their donations. To get at the exact mechanism, we ran a mediation model and found evidence for a partial mediation, such that the evidence caused behavior change through belief change. So in study 1, we found support for these two hypotheses, that belief predicts behaviors, but also that belief change predicts behavioral change. Moreover, when investigating the mechanism of the latter process, we found that evidence caused belief change, which in turn caused behavioral change. But as you may be thinking, this study suffers from two important limitations. First of all, contrary to real-world scenarios, participants' donation behavior came at no personal cost. And second, the health beliefs tested here are ideologically neutral or moderately endorsed. And we care more to know what would happen to beliefs that are more held with more conviction. And so to overcome these limitations, in study 2, we test the same design but make a few changes. So we first allow participants to keep the funds to themselves if they don't want to donate. And this would increase the ecological validity of our paradigm. Also in this study, our beliefs are now ideologically charged. So half of them are Democratic, half of them are Republican, and we pretest to make sure this is the case. An example of a Democratic statement is, quote, millions of children in the US have witnessed a shooting in the past year. While an example of a Republican statement is, quote, hundreds of thousands of abortions in the US are paid for with public funds each year. The corresponding campaigns were given a realistic name, such as the anti-abortion campaign or the anti-gun campaign. And to increase the generalizability of these findings, we now changed the population from which we sampled our participants, from cloud research workers in study 1 to now Princeton University students. We collected this data set using the Princeton subject pool starting in September 2020, and we had a stopping rule right before the November 2020 election. We chose this stopping date since we didn't want the political context to shift for some of our sample. 83 participants completed the study in this time window, in which we replicated the findings in study 1, that beliefs predict behaviors and that belief change predicts behavioral change. And remember, this is now a sample drawn from a different population. These are now ideologically charged beliefs, and our paradigm is more ecologically valid. So now we extended the generalizability and validity of our findings with this study. But next, we're also interested in how these effects interact with people's ideological leaning. However, in this sample, over 90% of participants identified as Democratic, so we could not investigate such interactions. Therefore, in study 3, we recruited enough participants on both sides of the ideological spectrum to conduct such analysis. So in study 3, we had the same design and the same ideologically charged stimuli as in study 2, but we now posted it on mTurk and collected the data in January 2021. The difference is now that in total, after exclusions, we have data from 393 participants, and half of them are Democrats, half of them are Republicans. We again replicated the findings in study 1 and 2, that beliefs predict behaviors and belief change causes behavioral change. We also investigated this effect's ideological interactions. So here's the data at pretest. In the left panel are the Democrats, on the right panel the Republicans. And I'll plot Democratic statements in blue, Republican statements in red. We find that beliefs at pretest predict behaviors at pretest in all these 4 ideological conditions, Democrats and Republicans rating Democratic and Republican topics. When looking at belief and behavioral change, we found that belief change causes behavioral change only for democratic participants on democratic topics. And none of the other ideological conditions had significant slopes, which means the causal impact of beliefs on behavior is ideologically modulated. Therefore, we found this asymmetric partisan bias in the effect of belief change on behavioral change. This bias may reflect the sociopolitical context at the time of data collection. We speculate that because we collected that data in January 2021, only days before the inauguration of a democratic president, which would be consistent with existing work on the impact of threat and uncertainty on political beliefs. But while difficult to disentangle, in our results, the role of the pandemic, the nationwide anti-racism protests, or pro-Trump rallies, we think that further research here should clarify exactly how consequential events could affect this impact of belief on behaviors. In summary, in a set of 3 experiments, we found that health-related and politically charged beliefs predict donation behaviors. We also found that changing these beliefs through evidence exposure can cause behavioral change. And we're looking at ideological conditions. Behavioral change only happens as a function of belief change when Democrats think of democratic issues. These findings advance the literature on behavioral nudges and the theoretical accounts of behavior, such as the health belief model and the theory of planned behavior, by analyzing the connection between beliefs and behaviors in an experimental context, offering our ability to infer a connection that's causal between the 2 constructs. These findings, we hope, are reliable and generalizable as we pre-registered and replicated the studies. They're also generalizable as we found them in different topics, such as health-related and ideologically charged issues, but also across different samples, so cloud research, MTurk, and Princeton students. We also strived to maximize ecological validity by ensuring that donation behaviors occurs at a personal cost to participants. And in terms of implications for policy applications, this research makes targeted recommendations for interventions aimed at changing behaviors. When the topics are neutral, such as health-related, our work shows that evidence exposure can change people's behaviors. This strategy can also be used when targeting Democrats in democratic topics such as gun control or climate change. However, if the targeted population is Republican, we suggest that other interventions should be tested. In future work, I would like to explore the effects of beliefs on behaviors at the collective level, focusing on the impact of conversational interactions on this effect, as well as on the role of network structures in the formation of collective behaviors. Other future directions prompted by this research include the investigation of the effect of belief on behavior as it interacts with other variables. So of particular importance, it would be the interaction with social norms, because here one hypothesis is that beliefs might impact social norms, beliefs might impact behaviors when the behaviors are perceived as normative rather than non-normative. Another variable worth investigating here is cultural tightness looseness, as it has the potential to reveal the effect's strength and boundary conditions across different groups and cultures. A third variable is social identity, as prior work found that people are most influenced by others with whom they share a common identity. So identifying with the source might increase the likelihood of incorporating the evidence in changing beliefs, which would cause behavioral change to happen differently. And with that, I would like to thank my collaborators, Aline, Jay, and Casey for their contributions on this project, my lab for their support, and you for your attention and interest. I am now looking forward to your questions.